15-minute walk or cycle away. Thirdly, I want to get homes built. Increasing the supply of housing in the city has been a priority of mine in Dublin City Council, and I want to bring that sense of urgency to Dáil Éireann. This by-election is happening at a critically important time for our city, and it is crucial that you are represented by someone with energy and new ideas, and who will have real influence at the highest levels to get things done. On Thursday, July 8th, please give me your number one vote.
Now, just in case you missed the face, have a look over my shoulder here at the Aviva. Have a look at that. James Geoghegan, vote number one in the Dublin Bay South by-election. Councillor Geoghegan, delighted that you're joining us here this evening. How are you?
I'm great. Delighted to be here with you, Alan. Look, James is fine, but delighted to be here.
You can call me Mr. Cantwell, James. Okay. Listen, I know that politics is in your DNA. People close to you know your passion for politics. But for those who are watching here tonight, who is James Geoghegan and what makes you tick, and why do you want to go to the next level in politics?
Yeah, well, I put myself forward for local politics, I think for the same reasons a lot of local councillors who are probably who are going to be participating in our next session and are online right now. I really care about my community. I get great sense of value of doing things to support my community. And I suppose in general, I've always been of the view that public service is extremely important. And by public service, for many people, that's starting a GAA club or working with your local soccer team. But for me, it just happens to be politics. That's the thing that I've had an interest in. And that's why I put myself forward. And I suppose in this constituency, I'm specifically putting myself forward to be the next TD, to play a role in the big challenges we face. And for me, the three priorities that I have is getting the country reopened through smart investment in childcare, education and our work environment. This 15-minute City for Dublin idea, the idea that your local workplace, your local school would all be a 15-minute walk or cycle from where you live. And then it's about getting homes built for young people. And actually in this constituency, just up the road from the Aviva Stadium, we have a real opportunity there. There's 3,500 homes on the Glass Bottle site, 600 of which are going to be affordable purchase. And I hope that those prices will be similar to the level that I voted for on Dublin City Council of €300,000 or less.
OK, you flagged some of the big ticket issues there, but of course all politics is local. You've been out on the ground for many weeks. You know the constituency like the back of your hand. What are the main issues that seem to be coming up? And are we seeing that Dublin Bay South is a microcosm of what Ireland is taxed by in housing, the economy? Is that what you're finding on the doorstep?
Well, the one thing that has been really refreshing is getting to the doorstep. And, the members who are on this call, there's nothing more that we love than an election, than engaging. And even outside of election times, for local representatives and for TDs, that direct engagement with voters is something very special in Irish politics. And it's a real relief that as part of this election, we are now back on the doorstep. And the reason we're back on the doorstep is because of the public health measures the public has taken, but also because of the leadership that has been shown by, in particular, the Taoiseach and Minister Harris. And that's actually resonating on the doors. I mean, I've had the fortune of going out with both the Taoiseach and Minister Harris, and people are saying to them, thank you for the work that you've done in restoring public confidence, and that we're now at a position through the successful vaccination programme that the country is reopening again. And here, right behind us, we're on the 3rd of July, we're going to have the first rugby game back, 3,000 spectators, Ireland versus Japan. And that's what people are really thinking about now. They're thinking about the future. And we're going to have Minister Donoghue in later. And again, he's another minister who's been out on the doorstep with me. And there is a great recognition that this has been a very challenging time economically for many businesses, but that the supports that have been put in place have given them the safeguards that were needed. And now it's about the future and where we're going to go next.
Let's talk about the future. Let's talk about the elephant in the room, Sinn Féin, the rise since the last general election. Every single poll is pointing to the fact that they're in the ascendancy. You're going to be under pressure from Lynn Boylan in this constituency. Is there a real prospect that we could see two Sinn Féin representatives coming out of Dublin Bay South?
Well, something that I suppose I'm saying on the doorstep is that, the people of Dublin Bay South voted to have a Fine Gael voice in this constituency over a year ago. And if they don't vote Geoghegan number one on the 8th of July, they won't retain that Fine Gael voice. And the reality is, I suppose, the way the polls are indicating, is that this is a shootout, to use Minister Harris's phrase, between Fine Gael and Sinn Féin. And that's why it's so important, particularly if there are members on this call from the Dublin Bay South constituency. I think a lot of them are out knocking on doors this evening, but if there are members throughout the country, to please plug into your networks to tell people, vote Geoghegan number 1 on the 8th of July, because it really is so important, not only just for this constituency, but for the signal that it's going to indicate for the country.
For those who don't vote Geoghegan number 1, what are you saying to them? I'm talking Fianna Fáil and the Greens in the constituency. Are you looking for their vote?
Well, I think it's really important that that people who are giving me their number 1, that they give their transfers to government candidates. I think there's a recognition in the public, particularly in recent times through the vaccination programme, that the three-party coalition has brought stability. And they want that stability to remain as we move to the future in terms of what type of economy, what type of society are we going to build? Is it one that's going to be filled with division and the type of divisiveness that we see regrettably in Northern Ireland? Is that what is going to be emulated in this country? Or is it the centre ground that's going to lead Ireland into the future? And I firmly believe, always have believed, that the best way you make sound policy for everyone's lives and livelihoods is through the centre ground. And I think Fine Gael have a central role to play in that and to ensure that we do hold the centre ground in this three-party coalition.
Now, we talk about the sense of confidence that's returning to the business community. You have been engaging with local businesses in the constituency for quite some time. What are they saying to you? Are they talking about that business is going to change? We'll do business differently in the future. What are their needs and wants?
Well, I think it's been a tale of two economies. In some of the local areas that I represent, we've seen new businesses sprout up during the pandemic. And then, of course, we've seen in the hospitality sector, and we know in the aviation sector, just how decimated they have been. And it's really on all of us to ensure that we get those businesses up and running and that they have sufficient supports to ensure that those parts of our economy get started again. And also that when people get the opportunity to go back to work again, that we have the correct incentives in place to ensure that all our small business owners can get the employees. Because as we know, regrettably, it is small business owners who lose the jobs, but it's also small business owners who create the new ones. And in terms of the future for our economy, we need Fine Gael, and I know they will, and I know Minister Donoghue is, standing up for small businesses and our workforce who work in small businesses, because they're the ones who are going to bring this country forward.
The younger cohort, the 25 to 35, feels somewhat disenfranchised when it comes to housing. Housing, it's in the front and centre when you talk to anybody from across the political divide. How do we solve that problem?
Yeah, well, I mean, I'm 36, and my wife and we're lucky enough that we have a home together. But there's so many people in my generation who are struggling in the affordability gap that we have. But there is hope. I mean, we've come through 3 crises in the last 10 years, between the financial crises, between Brexit and the pandemic. And this is a generational crisis. And the government will have the bandwidth, and they have the capital will. Because right now, we are investing more in housing than any government has done. And 1 in 3 homes are being built by the state. And it's the type of public investment and private investment, not this one solution fits all that you hear from our opponents, that's going to deliver more housing. But we have to stand up for young people. And look, I suppose that's what I intend to do if I get elected to the Dáil, which I hope I will.
But can you understand the frustration that it's very difficult for them to see hope?
I recognise that, and we all recognise that during the pandemic, homes have not been built. But we were starting to turn a bit of a corner before that we were hit with the pandemic. And now we have to do everything we can to get the 30,000 plus homes built every year. And, if we increase the supply, that will drive up affordability. But it's not just the supply of housing. It's actually what the state and the government are doing. I mean, the establishment of the Land and Development Agency is going to make a substantial difference for working people being able to purchase affordable homes in this constituency, in the city centre. And I said at the beginning, one of the projects that we did on Dublin City Council, a Dublin City Council-led project, public homes and public land, is O'Devaney Gardens. And I think what you're going to see in this country is a new form of affordable purchase housing, particularly in cities, affordable rental housing. And the state is going to play a central role in ensuring that working people can have access to market discounted rent, and equally that working people are going to get the opportunity to own their own home, because that's the country we've always been and that's the country we always want to have.
Let's talk about childcare, the difficulties that many young couples, such as yourself, you're married with 2 young children, there's issues there in relation to childcare, and sometimes it can be difficult for one of the partners to go back to work because of the prohibitive price and cost of childcare. What are we going to do?
Yeah, well, I mean, that's the first thing to say. I mean, it shouldn't ever be that way. I mean, if you've true equality in a country, nobody should have to decide that if they want to go back to work, that they can't go back to work because of the cost of childcare. But one of the things we've done over the last number of years is dramatically increase the investment in childcare. It's up about 114%. And that's the direction we have to continue to travel. And one of the interesting things that came up in the survey of the care of child that Fine Gael carried out amongst parents was that, yes, cost was the big issue, but they want to ensure quality as well. And as we move forward and we continue the investment that we're committed to making in this government, in my opinion, you are going to see in Ireland where early childhood education is treated just like primary, secondary or third level. There's an absolute recognition and commitment from government that is the direction of travel when it comes to childcare. And by investing in early childhood education, that does reduce the cost and it does increase the quality. And that's the place that we have to be if we're going to compete on the global scale, and also if we're going to keep our society as educated as we want it to be.
I want to come back to one of your main pillars, and that is the whole notion of a 15-minute city. Is it really workable?
Well, it is in a city, and that's the concept. A 15-minute city idea is a very straightforward principle in many ways. It's just the idea that your local school, your local workplace, your primary healthcare centre would all be a 15-minute walk or cycle from where you live. And that is something that I absolutely believe can be implemented in Dublin City, particularly when it comes to education, when it comes to healthcare, ensuring that everyone has inclusive access to both, irrespective of means, and that it's based on need.
James Geoghegan, thank you so much for joining us. I let you go because I know that you're going to be chairing the next session. We wish you well, and I've no doubt that we will be sitting in a different forum, having a conversation when you're elected. Thanks so much.
Well, I know you're a constituent yourself, so hopefully you'll vote number 1.
Definitely. James, thank you so much.
So, hi everyone. So we're switching right over now to the next session. And the next session is on reopening with confidence, the future for workers and business. I'm chairing this session and the subsequent motions, which is going to be a really interesting debate. And the speakers we have as part of this session is Minister for Finance, Paschal Donoghue, the Minister of State for Business, Employment and Retail, Damien English, Councillor John Clendenin, member of Offaly County Council and owner of Giltrap's Pub and glamping accommodation in his home village of Kinnitty, Councillor Sinead Shepherd, member of Cork County Council and owner and operator of Sinead Shepherd School of Dance in Cove in County Cork and famous for many other things, Sean O'Driscoll, the CEO of Ainua Hospitality Group Cork, and Angela Rutledge, owner of Olive's Room Cafe, Red Stables, St Anne's Park and Monk's Green Restaurant, Phibsborough. And I might just explain in terms of if you're making a contribution and you'd like to ask a question to our panel, if you could use the Q&A function only, and if you'd include your branch membership. And then just to maybe explain on the votes when it comes to motions, when you're voting on motions will take place after each 10-minute discussion on the motion. On the right hand of the screen, you'll see 3 tabs, chat, polls and Q&A, and you can click on the polls in order to vote, and you will then see options to vote for or against the motion that is being raised, and you can then click back to chat to continue to submit comments during the session. And perhaps just before we start the session, we might roll the video on how you vote.
Hello and welcome. In this tutorial, I will be showing you how to use the poll function in Hopin to cast your vote. After you enter the session, on the right-hand corner of the screen, you will see 3 options: chat, polls, and Q&A. To cast your vote, click Polls. You will then see 2 voting options appear on your screen. Once you click on your preferred option, your vote has been cast. If you have any difficulty, please email events@finegael.ie or phone 01 619 8444.
Well, Pascal, it is great to have you here. And look, I think that so many of the members are delighted to have you here. And, you know, this session is about the future of work, the future of business. And of course, you know, you've come out with me on the doors recently in our constituency, and you've probably seen the kind of the tale of the 2 economies in terms of businesses that were very badly affected by the pandemic and others that have done well. What do you see as the big lessons, I suppose, in terms of the supports that have been put in place during the pandemic, and what can we learn for the future as we now exit the pandemic?
So I think the very big lesson is that if you get to a point where a country and a society and an economy faces a gigantic shock like we did with COVID-19, there's real value in having your national finances and your economy in good condition so that you're able to respond back. And we have invested a huge amount of money through the employment wage subsidy scheme, through lots of different business schemes to look after our economy, to look after businesses that are absolutely viable, who will be successful in the future, but had to close for public health reasons. And for me, it is that lesson of the value of being ready for when the unknown happens. And I think we've shown our ability to do that. And now we need to look to the future with optimism, because I believe so many of our businesses who are opening up, we will help them open up successfully and help them get working again and rebuild our country.
And the way in which we managed the pandemic in terms of the economic supports that we provided, it was a very different sort of scenario to what we had after the financial crisis. And what do you see were the real reasons for that? Or how was it that we were able to support businesses in the way that we did, perhaps in a way that we weren't after the financial crisis?
Sure. Well, look, I think there's 3 reasons why. The first one is that this was a completely different crisis to the financial crisis. It was caused by a disease. Whereas where we were a decade ago, there were economic decisions that caused the last crisis. This one is completely different. Secondly, we had a central bank behind us that took a completely different view in how the European Central Bank helped, because they realised this was a crisis caused by biology. But then thirdly, we went into this crisis with budget surpluses. We've been running them for a while, with a really diverse set of employers and lots of different engines of growth in our economy, and then with a kind of a moderate level of lending and credit within our economy. So it did mean when we had to close things down for public health, we were able to help those who were closed, but there were many other parts of our economy that were still able to keep functioning, albeit from the spare bedroom or the kitchen, but they were able to keep going.
So obviously one of the big sectors that have struggled the most really is the hospitality sector. And what do you say, I suppose, to the hospitality sector now as they have reopened in outdoor settings? And how do you see the government and the state supporting them as they move forward?
I just think it's such an incredibly important part of our society first, and then in our economy. And entrepreneurs like Angela, they are amongst the very best that Irish business has to offer. And if you look how they coped with the awful effects of this disease, we have owed it to them to help them when we asked them to close down. And as they get ready to open, 2 thoughts spring to mind. The first one is to people who are looking in, who are thinking about what things will be like when our economy reopens. Our restaurants, our hotels, our pubs, our cafes will be safe places to be, because the people who are running them know that they have a duty to themselves, to their staff, to the people who come into them. It will be safe experiences and something we can look forward to and enjoy. And then when these businesses are reopening, for example, we've kept the employment wage subsidy scheme in place for the full year, because the last thing we want is a business to reopen, things to be a bit tricky at the start, they fall off the wage subsidy scheme and they fall at the final hurdle. So we've kept that in place. And then schemes like the COVID restriction support scheme, and God, there's so many different acronyms now, the CRIS scheme. But as businesses are reopening, they have the potential to get quite a big payment just as they're about to reopen to, again, help them with the cost of reopening. So I think we've every reason to be optimistic, but it is going to be hard going for many, and we're going to do what we can to help them.
The evidence, I suppose, from the financial crisis is that in terms of job losses, small businesses tend to shed the jobs the most, but they also actually play the most central role
in getting back again.
In getting back again.
Yep.
How central do you see small businesses in terms of recovering our job growth over the coming months and years?
I mean, that's exactly, you've just said it yourself, though, in terms of what has happened. You're dead right. It is the tens of thousands of small businesses that unfortunately lose people first. And what we have to do now is help those tens of thousands of small businesses be in a position to get those people back. And what is critical about that is those businesses are spread across our country. They're spread outside of our cities, or some of them are in our city centres. And what they can all do in, revitalising our communities, our parishes, our cities, of itself is so important. And I think, we've all been struck at times by how quiet our high streets now are, how quiet our cities are, how quiet things were when things were shut down. And now as these businesses are reopening again, we're seeing people be able to go out, enjoy themselves safely, and we have to keep at this and help that be a safe journey ahead, which it will be.
A lot of us admire you, Pascal, and I think one of the reasons a lot of us admire you is your ability to be Minister for Finance during the worst the pandemic that the world has ever seen, but also you're President of the Eurogroup, and you also seem to manage time to look after road resurfacing in Phibsborough. But how do you manage those three roles between being President of the Eurogroup, Minister for Finance, and looking after local politics in a way that I suspect no other of your colleagues in Europe have to do?
Well, the reason for the local piece is completely due to the councillors that we have in Colum and Ray, who I'm so fortunate to have, two amazing Fine Gael councillors who do so much local work, and I'm so indebted to the two of them for what they do. But in terms of pulling it together, it's an enormous privilege to be president of the Eurogroup. But I will always be grateful to Fine Gael for the opportunities that it gave me and for the support that Leo and Enda gave me at different points. And without them, and without Leo in particular, I wouldn't have had the opportunity to stand to be president of the Eurogroup and then get elected. You, like Angela, like any of our other guests here, like you just work really, really hard at your job. But I was explaining to a colleague of mine who is works in the Eurogroup there, in fact only yesterday, that actually being in the Eurogroup meeting, and when you're in the Eurogroup meeting getting contact from constituents about issues in Dublin Central is the way it should work.
Yeah.
It's the way it should work.
Yeah.
Because even if you're sitting in a room with the enormous privilege of the Irish flag in front of you and you're trying to represent your country and do your bit on some of the kind of bigger issues that the country's responding back to, the foundation for doing all of that is knowing what it is like for somebody in Dublin Central and knowing what their issues, hopes and concerns are. That's the foundation of it. It is the local that informs the national, and then the local then informs what you try to do when you're representing the country. But being able to do all of that has been enabled by the support the party's given me and the people of Dublin Central has given me, and I will be forever, ever grateful for that.
Well, you're doing all of us extremely proud, and thank you very much.
As you are, as our candidate in Dublin Bay South. And I mean, you see that when you're out, when I've been out canvassing with you, we're seeing how people are thinking about the future, about our country, and it's why it's so important to help you get elected.
Thank you very much, Pascal. And now we're going to hear from Damien, Minister of State for Business, Employment and Retail, who unfortunately has also been dragged out to Dublin Bay South, but this is a dangerous thing to say, but is most definitely up there with the top canvassers that I've gone out with. So Damien, One of the things that I suppose we have seen during the pandemic is that those businesses that have digital access have been able to perhaps survive in ways that other businesses haven't. So what do you see in the future in terms of digital transformation, the impact on businesses and workers, and also just in the need for upskilling and getting businesses online?
Good evening, James, and good evening to all our guests as well and panel. James, does that mean I'm finished canvassing over the next few weeks?
Most definitely not. Most definitely not.
There is a danger I could lose to some votes too, because we'll have some strong engagement on the doors. But I have to say, as you know, I love door knocking. I think that's the key over the next couple of weeks, that the amount of people we can reach through the doors and have a chance to present our case and present your case, because we all know in Fine Gael the excellent candidate you are. But our job is to support you to getting that message out there and making sure that everybody finds out just how effective a TD you will be. So looking forward to the few weeks ahead, and hopefully we'll get more time to engage with you. James, a couple of points there, and this is an important session, and I think to add to Pascal's comments there, I think we've, right through the pandemic, I think that the last government and the current government have stood with business, because we know that's how you save jobs, by working very closely with business, supporting them right through this. We know and we acknowledge all the range of supports, and the lens numbers there can't replace every lost euro, but they've got businesses back to the starting line, but they're in a position to reopen, and we want them to be reopened in a strong way and building that resilience we've seen over the last year. And a key part of that is absolutely the digitalisation agenda and the skills agenda. And if you look at the recovery plan that Pascal and Leo and the team launched there last week, there's a big focus there around the digitalisation agenda, money set aside, European money matched with our own finances here as well, to work with businesses. And the proof of that would be, if you look at what happened during COVID, over 13,000 businesses in the retail sector drew down a trading online voucher. And that means how they're able to expand their offering and can reach customers all over the country and beyond. But on top of that, then, we've an Enterprise Ireland retail online trading voucher as well, which is a grant of up to 40,000 towards a spend of 50,000, helping those businesses reach more customers. And we know, and a big part, I would say, in that sector, and there's many other sectors as well, about 70% of trade online goes to companies abroad. We want to win that back for Ireland. So I think we've an awful lot of companies now that are in a stronger position because they have invested in their digital agenda. We want to work with them on that. We want to support them through that process and help them to avail of all the new technologies that are out there. So you will see a range of new supports being offered coming from our department under the guise of our Taoiseach Leo Varadkar, party leader, making sure we reach those businesses who want to reach more customers and become more sustainable in the long run. So again, the combination of town centre first approach in terms of physical presence with the blend of online. But it's not just online trading. We want to reach out to a lot more companies to bring their business on a technological journey as well, and to invest in the top technology that's out there in terms of the business processes, make them more competitive to reduce their costs. But also that means a major upskilling of their existing staff and their new staff. You'll have heard Pascal reference on a couple of occasions, and certainly myself in the doors as well. This will be a jobs-led recovery. Fine Gael have proven in the past we can lead a jobs-led recovery, and we will do it again. This one will be much shorter. We're committed under the National Economic Recovery Plan that we'll get back to the employment levels we were at post or pre-pandemic by about 2023. And we'll go beyond that. By 2024, our aim is to have 2.5 million people at work. And we will do that by supporting businesses through the various supports and staying on their side, but reaching out to all those people who are changing job today, to reach them out through Heather Humphreys' department, through Simon Harris's department, and to wrap around them with new courses like through Springboard, through conversion courses, and new routes for education. The pathways to work will be published in the next couple of weeks as well. Again, assisting people on their journey if they have to change jobs or switch jobs. For those who are going to be able to hold on to their job, and the majority will, the wage subsidy is there to assist with those companies to keep them there in the next few months as we reopen fully and get back to trading as well. So we're in a very positive space. The last thing I will say, James, if it's okay, Leo put together an SME task force last October, and myself and Minister Tribe have been working with that now ever since, bringing together kind of a 40-point action plan to develop the SME community and to future-proof that sector and to give them every opportunity to grow and develop as well. So we've a range of initiatives there that we're committed to, that we're going to work on as well. A big part of that is dealing with climate change and adapting and lowering the carbon emissions through our industry and through our businesses. A great opportunity to do that by reducing their costs as well, but also by winning new customers by going green as well. So we'll do that too, and digitalization as well. I'll touch on remote working later on, James, as well. That's another issue that's important as well.
And Damien, thanks very much for that. And you mentioned there in the course of your identifying all of the supports that are there in terms of digital transformation. You mentioned this idea of the high street first, and how do we get that balance right? Because there obviously is this huge goodwill within all communities right across Ireland that they want to support their local businesses that have reopened. But of course, for some businesses, the digital transformation mightn't support the high street. So how do you see us getting that balance right?
I think the balance is key, James. And two things I would say. All the research that we carry out through our department and with all the enterprise groups we work with or we're involved in across the different government departments, all the research will show us that the Irish customer does look local and wants to look local and wants to buy local. And we ran a number of campaigns during COVID through our department about looking local. So the opportunity is there. We have to make sure that our businesses can provide that service and can reach all those customers, be it in the town centre or online. And I would encourage all businesses to try to develop a strategy for, yes, their physical premises town centre. We have put in place a cross-departmental new team who are developing a new framework which will operate with local town teams to develop town centres and to deal with all the brownfield sites we see, all the vacancy over the shop. A lot of opportunity there to bring people back into living our towns and villages and our cities again as well, but also to develop more enterprise opportunities. You hear a lot of talk through the remote working strategy around development of hubs. There's plenty of buildings in our town centres and villages that are ideal for remote working hubs or for hubs for startups as well. So the support there being announced, will support that too. So with the town centre development, town centre first principle that's adopted in the program for government, very strong on that. We will be focusing resources through the capital plan that will be announced in the summer at town centre development, be that in an urban setting or a rural setting. But we do believe that if you have a strong core centre, giving your existing businesses every opportunity to expand and continue and survive, but also bring new businesses in to support that as well, and have more people on the streets spending their money. Don't forget, James, there's an extra million people that will be living in this country over the next probably 17 or 18 years, and we want to plan for that. And that's about having really strong town centres. But to make business viable and sustainable, they want to be able to buy into the town centre, their existing premises, but expand online. And that's why we have a digitalisation strategy that I would say complements our town first principle as well. And the two together means the business has every opportunity to reach new customers, to maximise their sales and to create more jobs. And that's what it's all about.
And you mentioned there remote working hubs. And look, one of the things that I've noticed going around the constituency, I talk about how that our village environments have changed so much and we need to change our city centre because of this remote working that we now are in, and that there's this hybrid model that people may want to retain some of that remote working. And in some places, you see a couple of kids running around the place and remote working that they can't wait to get back into. And myself and Claire at home, we've had challenging times, to say, like any other parent trying to, if you're both working, you have the kids at home. So, but I do think, there is a desire, I think it's real, it's not just a made up one, to have this hybrid working model. And obviously the government has worked on a remote working strategy, and maybe you might tell us about that as to how do you see, in an exited pandemic strategy, a hybrid remote working policy working?
I suppose, James, it can only work if it's planned correctly. And that's why the launched the strategy back in January, a 15-point action to make sure that remote working becomes a permanent feature and give people the choice and make it easy for more and more businesses to facilitate remote working. Not every job it can be managed from a remote setting, but quite a lot can. And we want to make it possible that those who can work remotely have the opportunity to do it, well supported, either at home in their house or through a hub, but in coordinated and in conjunction with their business manager, be it the manager or the owner of the organisation as well. You touched on trying to work remotely with family and with 2 young kids. And I'm very familiar with the situation. I have 4 young kids myself at home. And I think we were all sent home last year in March, April 2020. And we were sent home to work remotely, or I would say in most cases to try and work remotely. And it wasn't planned. It was an unplanned environment. It took a little bit of time for everyone to adjust. but adjust we did, and everybody found new ways to be able to be extremely productive and to work remotely. All the results are extremely positive, coming back through all our research with business organisations, with those who had the option to work remotely as well. And we've made a lot of improvements on that as well. But there was no choice in that. People had to go home. We want to make sure now, as we reopen and as people are encouraged to come back into their cities or back into our offices, that working together with the business community, with our employees, people will have the option to work remotely. So a key part of that is to try to fast track where we can the National Broadband Plan. It's great, number one, that it's signed and that it's in play already and rolling out connections to people's homes all over the country. And that's nearly a 5 billion spend over the next couple of years as well. But Fine Gael are committed in government to speeding that up and to reach those houses quicker, because that facilitates remote working. Mapping out and developing new hub spaces are key to this. And our own department, Department of Enterprise, Trade and Employment with the Taoiseach, in conjunction with the head of Ard Fheis, naturally supported by Pascal with the finance, that we're reaching out now to develop new hub spaces and to connect them and to map them together and to make sure that those remote working spaces are of a certain level, that you know that if you turn up at any work hub space, that there is a certain standard there, and that you can expect a good service as well. That's number two. There is a review then ongoing of the costs and the expenses of working at home and the tax relief to go with that. Pascal, in the last finance bill discussion, committed to, in this budget coming forward for 2022, to look at this whole area, and that's part of our strategy here, that we look into at budget time to make some changes to facilitate the remote working at home challenge as well. Also, the right and the important part, the right to request to work remotely. And that's a new piece of legislation that will be in place before the end of the year. The Taoiseach is leading the charge on that, Leo Varadkar. And that, again, gives people the option and the choice on the law to request to work remotely. And then it kicks off a whole process with your employer, with your organisation, about how to deal with that request and to how to facilitate it if possible. It doesn't mean that they have to, but there's a whole process they have to go through. And a big part of that, I would say, is that I would ask every employer here to have the conversation with their employees, to work with ourselves, with our HSA, which will develop the legislation and the advice and guidance around having staff working at home as well and working remotely. There is the whole area of the right to disconnect. So I would ask every company, if they could, to take a look at our action plan and to develop their own action plan to facilitate remote working where possible. And I think you're absolutely right, James. You're on the money here. The majority want the hybrid model. I think most people would like to be able to be 2 or 3 days in the office or wherever they are, and then the rest of the days either at home in their house working remotely, in a secure place, in a safe place, safe environment, or in a local remote hub. So a lot of opportunity here to do this if we get it right. The whole idea of having strategy is that we get it right, that it becomes a permanent feature because it's well planned. And we've had great events run by Fine Gael where we've engaged right across the country with a number of people who are interested in this space. And I think that's helped our thinking, and it will help us develop this and roll out this action plan in the months ahead as well.
Well, thank you very much, Damien. And look, if anyone had any doubt, I think it's self-evident the depth of knowledge you have of your own brief is basically displaying the passion that you have for what you do and the importance that you hold. And look, that's it's obvious to me, even just walking around homes with you, but it's also obvious to constituents in my area who you may recall the other day said that they only ever see you on the TV when Fine Gael are in a sticky situation and you have to go out and defend it. And look, I think all of us are really proud of the role that you do as a minister, but also very proud of when you do that role in difficult situations, which is not easy, and you stand up for the party. So listen, thank you very much, Damien. And we're going to move on now to our panel of 2 fellow councillors and 2 business people. We've Councillor John Clendenin, Councillor Sinead Shepherd, and Sean O'Driscoll and Angela Rutledge in studio here. And we're going to start with Angela. Angela, you're from the coolest part of Dublin. That's a very dangerous thing to say when I'm running in a different area. But, Phibsborough is considered up there, certainly. I think Lonely Planet had it as the coolest city to visit. I suppose, what have you seen as the kind of challenges during the pandemic in running a business?
Well, I suppose, first of all, I should say that every cloud has a silver lining, because it's because of COVID-19 that I'm here, because when COVID hit last year, we were so desperate as businesses in the restaurant industry, and we didn't know what to do, that I ended up texting Pascal saying, please shut this down, please lock it down, please help. And ever since, I've been riveted to see what Fine Gael and the government have been doing. So thank you for having me. In terms of getting back open, and I suppose the main thing is about getting the staff back to work now. And that has been quite challenging in circumstances where some people have retrained, some people have gone home, some people have decided for their own reasons to stick with the pandemic unemployment payment for as long as it lasts. So that has been well and truly challenging. And I suppose the converse of that is that the single greatest support has been the wage subsidy scheme, and that's absolutely essential to the survival of businesses in my industry.
And have you seen a change in behaviour when customers come and have a meal? I haven't had the benefit yet of having, I did have a lunch with Minister, but I haven't gone out with my wife yet to have a meal. Is there a sense of sort of joy or nervousness, or how do you feel your customers are?
In the initial lockdown, there was, and when we reopened for takeaway, everybody was just so grateful to be able to get back out and have a cappuccino or a sandwich that they hadn't made themselves on Brennan's. And then there followed a period of kind of like intense public scrutiny of the way that you had changed your operation. So I guess I began to understand a little bit what a politician might feel like. Because on the one hand, we were like the cafe incarnation of 1984. We were offending people's constitutional rights. And on the other hand, if we stepped out of line, if a face mask slipped, you were really getting that as well. But I think people have relaxed into it, and it's been a learning curve for all of us. We've all learned about our face masks and our distancing and our hand sanitising. So it's really about behaviour change over the course of the last 15 months.
And in terms of, I suppose, the workers that have come back, your staff coming back, what's their experience been like, having obviously not been able to work for the last while? Are they, delighted to be back at work, or have they found the transition from not working to coming back to work challenging? Are there any issues in terms of employee welfare that you see, or that require tackling into the future?
Yeah, I suppose like all of our employees that wanted to come back to work were able to come back to work fairly quickly. And obviously you had to put some precautions in place in terms of distancing, and making sure that anybody with an underlying condition was going to be safe at work, and taking into account all their personal needs as well. If they had children at home that weren't in school, you had to factor that in as well. And then just going into the future is about just like looking at the package of those employees and what they're getting, and how they can make their way in the world as well.
So another person on our panel here, who's also in the hospitality sector and is also a newlywed and got married during the pandemic, and most importantly, he got married to a very prominent member of the Dublin Bay South constituency, which is obviously a very important person to marry. But John Clendenin, could you tell us? Obviously, you're a publican, and I mean, how difficult has the pub sector found it, and I suppose how have you survived as a business during the pandemic?
Yeah, it has been very difficult, James. And I suppose it's just dealing with the unknown since the very first day that we closed, and all that uncertainty that followed, whether we would be for 2 weeks or whether it be for a month or longer. And, with the benefit of hindsight now and the challenges that we did face, I think what we really saw in terms of the support initially from government, we very much as a party put ourselves forward as a party that supports small businesses, and those supports are very much welcome. And the average publican with a turnover of 180,000 would have seen supports of 20 to 25% of that turnover over the course of a year. And a 25% net profit would be good by any standards of business. So I really think we went above and beyond in terms of what we did to support businesses. But we used the opportunity to carry out upgrade and increase our capacity works that we had planned for a number of years, and we're just waiting for the right opportunity. So in one sense, COVID actually assisted, but we're still dealing with the unknown and the uncertainty of it. And moving from, whether it be outdoors to indoors, I think first of all, every publican is delighted to just have the opportunity to trade. And I think that goes for everyone right across the hospitality sector, to actually just get opened and get operating. But I think really what I would like to see is that as long as there is restrictions in place, businesses can't operate to full capacity, and supports will have to be running in tandem as long as those restrictions are there. But really, in terms of the challenges, and I mentioned the uncertainty, we're trading out for a couple of weeks, and there's already there's still challenges propping up that we're having to overcome, and even just simple things like trying to hire young staff that they can't drive because they haven't had the opportunity to do lessons or tests over the last 18 months, and that's something that we would never have envisaged. But certainly, I think the challenge, one of the main challenges, is just the shortage of skilled labour for our sector, and I appreciate the importance of working from home and remote working and so on. But I think we also have to be mindful of just the importance of the service sector that can't work from home. And I think we really now more than ever before need to invest in not just the supporting of businesses, but the promotion of it as a lifelong opportunity for career progression, and try and encourage more young people to consider it as a career path. So to promote it, see the investment in that, and to support businesses to try and recruit more young people into sectors and try and fill that void. As Angela mentioned, people that have gone home and that worked here from overseas, or have just taken alternative career paths. So I think we just need to make it an appealing sector and an appealing career path for people once again, and encourage them. We are frontline workers in a sense, obviously not doing what the medical professional would have done throughout the whole uncertainty and of COVID and the height of cases in hospitality or hospital and ICU capacity being put under pressure, but we are, albeit, meeting different people on a daily basis, and that digitization, I suppose, that Minister English spoke about, is probably an element that I never saw coming to the level that it's at now, in terms of how we're taking reservations for tables, and the whole aspect of contact tracing, and following up with customers once they've left. So, it really is a new way of doing business. And I think a lot of the hospitality businesses out there did use the opportunity to improve their businesses, expand and diversify and move to an outdoor offering. And really and truly, that would not have been possible without the likes of the CRSS, and the likes of the Restart grants and so on.
And I suppose the same question for you in terms of consumer behaviour. I haven't had my first pint of Guinness yet, but there's nothing more beautiful than a pint of Guinness being poured at a bar. And I wonder, were they running in the door? Were they jumping on the stool? What's the kind of behaviour that you're seeing in the pubs as people come back? And do you see, in terms of, I suppose, the frequency of coming back, are there changes you have to make all around that aspect of your business?
Yes, absolutely. And I suppose I better not, there's nobody jumping on stools. We're very compliant in terms of COVID guidelines and so on. But
that was a bad speech
on
my part.
No, don't worry. I think the saying, you don't know what you've got until it's gone, has really come to show in relation to a draft pint of Guinness, or going out and sitting at a table and having a meal served to you. And we've seen plenty of social media posts and promotions and campaigns about drinking and eating at home and so on. But I think we as human beings are social animals. We want to get out. We want to meet people. We want to have spontaneity in our social scene. And I think there's no better place to get that than in a pub or a restaurant. And I think right now we are seeing a novelty factor possibly. And there's probably an aspect of concern that, if it is a novelty factor, that there will be support when that possible reduction in visits does occur, if it does occur. There's often talk of the Roaring Twenties and how that might be repeated again. So it is a very much a wait and see. But SMEs, in Offaly, make up 80% of business and employment, and hospitality will be a major factor in contributing to that. So I really do hope that the supports will outlive, I suppose, the restrictions, and to get back to hopefully some sort of normality in terms of capacity indoors that doesn't require social distancing.
Well, John, I think, look, we all hope for that. There's no question about it, and I hope you're feeling the goodwill from the community around Ireland in terms of supporting their local pub. And look, just to say to you personally, not only did you have the challenge of managing one of the most difficult sectors that have been touched by the pandemic, but as a councillor, you had to look after so many people in your community at the same time as trying to look after your business, and you still somehow found time to get married. So it's seriously impressive, the workload that you've put in. Our next, I'm going to bring Sinead in now, and we're talking about pubs, and I think the only time I've ever danced is probably in a pub, but of course you're of a much higher level than that rubbish type of dancing that I'm doing, and you're the operator of, apart from being a councillor as well, you're the operator of Sinead Shepherd's School of Dance. And look, I think we all recognise how important culture as well as sport is going to be for the well-being of our country as we recover. But were you able to carry out any dance classes during the pandemic?
Hi James, how are you? I like dancing in pubs now too as well, even though we do other types of dancing with the teaching. But yeah, I suppose, look, the arts, there's no denying that the arts and culture sector has been hit extremely badly during this pandemic. You know, it's been very difficult for that sector. We along with every other business nearly in the country moved online quite quickly once the pandemic hit. We moved on to Zoom, and luckily all our students came with us. So I suppose we had never done that before. We never really knew the virtual world in relation to teaching dance and performing, but schools all across the country really embraced the online world. We did showcases online rather than doing them in big theatres. We were able to do our dance exams with our teachers that would usually travel over from London. We did virtual exams with them, so children are still able to take their exams. So, I suppose we adapted, and that's really, I suppose, all small businesses in this country have to be commended for what they have done over the last 15 months. They have really embraced change. They have, really taken chances with the virtual world, and they have really adapted in every situation that they've had to ensure that their businesses survive, the same as us in the arts, but it has been difficult and has been challenging, but it's also, I suppose, been a learning curve. And I think probably going forward we will keep a little bit of the online going. It has opened doors for us where we have been able to get teachers from the West End productions and from America to come on board and be able to give workshops, so we wouldn't have had things like that before, so that's great. But I suppose in relation to the arts, it has been quite difficult. We were like the pubs there, but we were like one of the first to close and probably one of the last to open. But I suppose the government have played a very big role in getting us reopened. We have launched recently 14 million new support scheme for live entertainment. We've 5 million to all local authorities for outdoor live performances, and I suppose that allows businesses like myself and small businesses throughout the country to be able to bring back the arts to our local communities for this summer. And it brings vibrancy to the communities where we're promoting massively staycations now. And what better than to have this scheme through local authorities that drama, singing groups, dance groups can perform within their communities outdoors in a safe environment. We have the 5 million capital support for live entertainment. So we are making big strides as government to ensure that the arts and culture sector can come back, because I suppose it has been extremely sad to see our theatres close and not to see not only performers but those backstage people, the crews, lighting technicians, all these people out of work. But I think with all these schemes that we have been bringing in over the last few months, it will ensure that we get back on our feet again.
Well, it sounds like you adapted in ways that, to be honest, I couldn't even imagine that you could do in the sector that you're in. And I suppose, how important do you see, we've heard the Taoiseach talk about the mental health crisis that we might face into as we exit the pandemic. I mean, how important do you see, specifically dance as an outlet for so many young people as a way to improve their well-being? There's a lot of anxiety amongst a lot of young people actually going back to college next year because they've been so used to sort of being on their own. And what role do you see, I suppose, both dance and your sector playing in that process?
Yeah, I spoke about this previously, but I suppose dance and the art sector specifically, it's a massive outlet for people, and especially children. I mean, they start with us really from the age of 3, and some of them have been with myself personally for 15 years, and it's a huge outlet for them. It's a space that they can come to, that they're comfortable with. It's a hobby for them, and specifically, I suppose, with the art sector, children gain such confidence in this sector. They're taught how to perform live on stage, to be comfortable with themselves, be comfortable working in big groups in classrooms, and it's a real outlet for them. And I suppose going forward, we have had the most crazy 15 months for children. I have 3 small boys myself, and you see them going back to their hobbies. And there's a lot of kids, as you say, James, they're shy coming back into the outside world, really, because they've been cocooned for so long, even, not in school. So it's so important that we get them back to their activities, to the outlets from school that they enjoy, whether that's sport, whether that's singing, dance. It will play a vital role in the next few years in ensuring that kids have that space to be themselves, to be comfortable in, to be able to share an experience with their friends. And I think that's very important going forward, because the children have missed, and teenagers have missed so much of those type of activities in the last number of months. So that's why it's crucial, I suppose, that we see funding coming from government, as we do now, to ensure that these businesses are there for the future of the children.
Well, thanks so much, Sinead, and thanks for doing the role that you do, because I think you are the champions of well-being, no different to sports clubs. You're just as important as the additional care that we provide for children and adolescents, and you're so important to their futures. And look, if you ever think of establishing a branch in Dublin, I'd be very concerned about the genes that my 3-year-old son may have gotten from me. So for him to get into a dance class, I think could be a very important initiative. We'll move on now to our 4th member of the panel, which is Sean O'Driscoll from Cork as well. Sean, maybe you could tell us a little bit, I suppose, about your business, and equally the impact that your business has faced during the pandemic.
Yeah, thanks, James. We're a hotel group. We've 9 hotels across the 4 provinces, and pre-COVID, we'd have employed 1,250 people. And over the last 15 months, our revenues have been down 80%, and that's really a similar story across the hotel industry. And we're hugely appreciative as a business for the supports that the government put in place. Things like the wage subsidy, the pandemic unemployment payment, commercial rates waiver, and the tourism VAT rate reduced to 9%. All these things have made a huge difference to the sector, and I think the government and Gael have showed a very strong commitment to the tourism industry, protecting as many as 270,000 jobs in tourism and supporting its survival. And I want to personally thank the Taoiseach, Minister Donoghue, and all the ministers in the parliamentary party. The engagement with the sector and the support to the sector over the last year has been fantastic. I've had the pleasure of driving around the country over the last 2 weeks as we've been reopening all our hotels, and we've 1,000 employees now back at work, and it's great to see the enthusiasm. People are genuinely thrilled to be back at work after eight months sitting at home. As John mentioned, there have been some challenges. Unfortunately, we have lost a lot of very experienced hospitality professionals to other industries, and upwards of probably 30-40% of our experience in the industry is gone. So we've a huge training challenge ahead in terms of upskilling in the industry. So it is a bit like opening for the first time again. it will be, there's no doubt, it will be a slow rebuild. There's no international business yet. Corporate business is pretty much non-existent at the moment, and obviously we're dealing with much smaller weddings. So it's going to be some time before there's a return to normal turnover in our business. However, I would be confident from April 22 onwards. I think the tourism industry will rebuild, and I think we will get back to being Ireland's largest Indigenous employer again. We have to remember back in between 2013 and 2016, tourism created 60,000 jobs, and I think that can be done again, and I think we will do that again.
Well said, Sean. And we all know how important the role tourism played in our export-led recovery, and I absolutely believe it's going to do so again. We're going to go straight into our motions now, and we have our first motion from the Clare constituency executive, and it's a related motion or there were related motions also received from the Arthur Griffith branch, Limerick and Dublin Fingal constituency. And the proposer of this motion is Luke Hogg from the Clare constituency, and the seconder is Laura Farrell. So if we could have the proposer of the motion, Luke Hogg.
Thank you, Councillor Geoghegan, and look, I might just take this opportunity just on behalf of Clare Fine Gael to wish you all the very best in your by-election campaign. So ministers, deputies, senators, councillors and members of Fine Gael, I'm delighted to be able to propose the first motion of the evening, which calls on this Ard Fheis to recognise the importance of Shannon International Airport to both the national and Midwest economy. Shannon, like other airports across the country, has been greatly impacted by COVID-19. Passenger numbers declined by almost 80% in 2020, with the airport losing many key routes, including transatlantic and European services, with the recent announcement by Aer Lingus to close its Shannon base representing the latest blow for the airport. Since getting its independence from the Dublin Airport Authority in 2013, before the lockdowns of COVID and the grounding of the Boeing 737 MAX aircraft in 2019, which uniquely impacted Shannon, Shannon had actually seen the largest growth in passenger numbers of any airport in Ireland outside of Dublin, with 300,000 passengers being added over that time. However, this figure pales in comparison with the growth seen at Dublin Airport, where 13.8 million passengers were added over the same period. We also know that despite Shannon's location at the heart of the Wild Atlantic Way, the majority of tourists who visit the West Coast are flying into Dublin. The dominance of Dublin Airport, which is over 6 times the number of passengers of Shannon, Cork and Knock airports combined, will continue to stifle economic development across the regions if it is not properly addressed. Project Ireland 2040, introduced by Fine Gael, highlighted Shannon Airport as being a catalyst for economic development in the Midwest. However, a recent report by Limerick, Ennis, Galway and Shannon Chambers of Commerce found that the continued dominance of Dublin will make it almost impossible for airports like Shannon to drive economic growth in the regions. Although COVID-19 has devastated the airport, Shannon must now look to seize the opportunity of reopening, using this as a moment to reset, redefine and reposition the airport to secure the return of routes and services lost to COVID and attract new airlines with new destinations. Fine Gael, along with its partners in government, now need to step up its efforts in supporting Shannon in its recovery. A new chairperson needs to be appointed with the vision, creative thinking and track record to deliver a strong return to growth for Shannon. Government also needs to ensure the return of the Aer Lingus base in Shannon to secure the transatlantic routes and Heathrow connectivity that will be vital in ensuring Shannon can realise its full potential and drive the economic development of the Midwest. I want to call on this Ard Fheis to support this motion to secure the future of Shannon Airport and the prosperity of the Midwest region.
Thank you very much, Luke. And we're now going to have our seconder, Laura Farrell.
Thank you, Chair. Ministers, senators, delegates and everyone else who's watching online. I'd like to second this motion that Shannon is about more than just the airport, and the previous support of Shannon has been a support of 46,000 jobs in the Midwest area, which, as you can imagine, in Limerick City has roughly something like 100,000 people living there. That's a very, very considerable number of people. The economic impact of Shannon Airport every year is 3.6 billion per annum, and it returns to the Exchequer every year 1.6 billion. The Shannon Group is about more than just aviation, though. It also has a considerable property business as well, which has also in some ways both suffered and benefited from COVID. And it also has an extensive heritage business, which expands to the whole country. There are places in Dublin that are actually owned by Shannon Heritage, and they have lost something like 300,000 visits because of the COVID restrictions. Now, I think it's important to look at the wider context about this as well, because aviation is an all-Ireland business. And if we are losing PSO routes, as we have seen last weekend with the collapse of Stobart Air, to airports like Kerry Airport and Donegal, which have very small numbers of routes. If you look at earlier in the year, both Shannon and Cork had in some days as little as one flight going in and one flight going out. At the moment, Shannon has roughly about 6 to 7 flights a day going in and coming out. That is not sustainable for the airport, and nor will that be sustainable for the future. So it's a business that we need to look at the whole country, not just Dublin, not just Shannon, not just Cork, but the whole country. We cannot afford to have situations like we had in the past, where airports took years and we had huge job losses, as we saw. In 2002, Aer Lingus lost 1/3 of all its staff. So I implore the government and the delegates here and everyone else to consider their support for this motion and to back this motion. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Laura. And we're going to hear now from Cian Kelly.
Thank you, James. And it's great to see that this motion has sort of garnered such support from the Midwest region as well, particularly when you see the two constituencies that are very much where Shannon is at the heart, in Clare and Limerick. One of the things that we felt in our branch in Limerick is that the PSO routes really are one of the only ways to secure Shannon's connectivity and Shannon's viability coming out of the pandemic and out of Brexit. Like traditionally in Ireland, we've only ever seen PSO routes as being domestic. And while that is the case across PSO routes right across Europe, there are a large number of incidences where PSO routes are actually used for international travel. Now, anybody that may be travelling to the European Parliament to its second base in Strasbourg need to know that actually Strasbourg Airport has 4 international PSO routes that the French government have seen fit. And Strasbourg is an airport that is right at the heart of Europe. It is not like Shannon on the western periphery on an island. And Strasbourg connects to Amsterdam, Madrid, Prague. Cyprus uses PSO routes to connect Larnaca to Brussels. The Czech Republic uses PSO routes to connect its regional airports on its eastern border to Munich and Vienna. And currently Ireland is using PSO routes on a maritime basis to connect us to both Europe and to the UK. One of the number one routes and the number one most important connections that Shannon has is Shannon Heathrow. It is, anybody that lives and has grown up in the Midwest knows it is one of major historical significance. The period during the last, after the crash where it was lost, had a devastating effect. Now, like a lot of people, I went out last Friday for the first time enjoying sitting down and meeting with a lot of my friends. And unlike people might be here, I actually have a large number of friends who live in Limerick and work in London. People who before the pandemic would have commuted on a regular basis. Now, people can do with the connectivity and that they can do so much. But ultimately, they told me there's actually a very large community in the Midwest who need that to actually get to work. And eventually, the UK is putting pressure on people to get back to work. Without the government putting down and giving the safety net for airlines who have hemorrhaged cash during the pandemic, to get that and to know that they can connect these routes, and that ultimately that once they get up, unless people come back at the start when they get back, and that there may be certain financial difficulties at the start, but what you're doing is you're creating that security that they can do that, so that you can get the likes of Shannon Heathrow and one major connecting to the European Union. Probably, I think the best place to be something like Charles de Gaulle, so that people who do need to get to the European Parliament or connect us to the heart of Europe and Brussels could be able to do that straight by hopping on from Charles de Gaulle and a TGV that takes you straight to Brussels. Without these starts, there is no real, like Shannon will really, really struggle. And the Midwest, and whether it goes from whether you're operating hotels down in Killarney or tourist initiatives in Westport and Mayo, people need this, and the only way this can be done. It was really disappointing today to hear the first response from Minister Ryan today was to commission a report. When we were in opposition for years and years, we criticised governments about having reports. We do not need a report. This is something we were able to move very quickly in relation to Brexit for the maritime routes. And if this motion passes, I'm imploring anybody that's sitting at Cabinet, this is not something that needs a report. We do not. There are other issues that can be dealt with down the line in terms of the management structures and things like that. But the public service obligation routes are something that needs to be moved on immediately. It can be done very, very quickly if the desire is there.
Thanks very much, Keane. Thanks very much for...
Just one last point. We were able to give quite a bit of subsidies to the airport, but airports need airplanes. And that is really why we need these public service obligations. And
thanks very much, Keane.
I implore everybody to support this.
Thanks very much, Keane. Minister, you heard some very passionate contributions there from Luke, Laura and Keane of the challenges that are faced in Shannon Airport and the aviation sector more specifically. What do you have to say to them and in terms of the motion itself this evening?
Well, I mean, Fine Gael is absolutely committed to how we can support the growth of our tourism business again here in Ireland, which we will do. And we absolutely appreciate the fundamental importance of Shannon Airport, not just to its county, but to the general region, as so many have said, to the Midwest region. When I was Minister for Transport, I was responsible actually for the national aviation policy that recognised the importance of Shannon Airport. And I know, of course, in recent weeks of the really difficult developments that have happened there now with regard to the Aer Lingus staff and crew that are based there. So firstly, absolutely recognise the importance of Shannon to London Heathrow, how important that is as a route. And then secondly, of course, as our public health restrictions begin to change, which we are targeting for the middle of July, the government will absolutely work with Shannon Airport to help it recover. Because, as all of the speakers have said, it is critical, not just to tourism, to work, foreign direct investment, access in and out of that part of our country. And absolutely, I think it's a very important motion. And the government, I have no doubt at all, will respond back to that when our public health begins to change, which of course we're targeting from a travel point of view from the middle of July onwards.
And Minister Damien English, I might bring you in there. Obviously, this is a very significant issue in Shannon Airport, and Minister Donoghue has outlined the commitment to its future. Have you anything further you'd like to add to the motion tonight this evening?
There are two key things. I think it's a very worthwhile motion and it's very well presented there, and the guys make good points, which would probably mirror what we've been hearing a lot from Deputy Kieran O'Donnell and Deputy Joe Carey as well, and new Senator Maria Bourne constantly raising these issues directly with us, along with Patrick O'Donovan as a minister sitting with myself and Pascal as well. So I think the points are extremely well made, and it is important that, as Pascal referenced, we value and recognise the importance to the Shannon region and to the three counties of Clare, Limerick, Tipperary as well, and around that, which benefit from that airport. We're well beyond that because the access into Galway and so on, down into Portland to the south. I chair the regional, one of the regional strategies for that area, which covers the three counties, Tipperary, Limerick and Clare. And they would constantly reference that the last two regional enterprise action plans that they've managed really had success because of the Shannon Airport and what it brings there. And a lot of the jobs are linked to that. And again, if we're going to support a jobs-led recovery, we need to be able to make sure that we have the right infrastructure in place to attract that investment. We can see the investments that's happened in the Shannon region because of the combination of the airport being there, but the aviation sector, and also that our educational system down there responded to the needs of enterprise and worked with them to develop courses and companies out there as well. So I know there's one or two companies that are engaging with us directly who are who are linked to airline industry, but not directly doing that as well, which are also seeking support and are getting support by government too. The wage subsidy is key, and the other supports that Pascal touched on. So we are committed to this. It's very, very important. I would agree with Keane. It's not that we need reports, but you need to have the evidence gathered, which guarantees investment through the various state agencies as well, which is happening too. But I think what I want to again mention, because it was touched on by some of the Project 2040. In February 2018, the Fine Gael-led government launched off that P2040 again, and its main focus was to have regional balance and have regional growth, and to recognise that it was very, very important that the next 1 million people who live in this country are not all based in the East Coast and are in the regions and are in our new cities of Limerick, of Waterford, and Galway, and Cork, of course, and while also developing co centres like Sligo and like Dundalk, with our capital town. So we are committed to having that regional balance, and that means having the infrastructure like our airports in place, and that's something that we will and are committed to do, and we will make sure it happens as well. But thankfully, when we were in government before now, we put in place these long-term plans, which then meant that Pascal could allocate long-term funding to that. And I would always say the Fine Gael party are very much involved about dealing with issues today, but also looking 5, 10, 20 years ahead. And that's something we've always done in government, and very, very important. And that's why we have been able to respond to COVID in a positive way, because the resources were there, because the public finances were in order. And we have to make sure that those public finances now are used to save the jobs in the regions and to make sure we can come back and grow the employment in the sector too. Because if we have our infrastructure like our Shannon Airport, the knock-on investment and jobs, then people have the option and the choice to live in the region. And that's what it's about. People have to have a functional need to be able to live in all our counties. And that's what we're trying to do, to make sure we have that spread of job creation and investment as well.
Thank you very much, Minister. Look, I hope Luke, Laura and Keane can see the commitment not just to the spirit of the motion, but to the actual substance of the motion. And I'm going to call from the government, and I'm going to call on a vote on the motion now. So there's a vote on motion 4.1 is now called, and you can follow through the voting process as I outlined in the beginning. So the voting takes place on the right-hand side of the screen. As I said at the beginning, you'll see 3 tabs, chat, polls and Q&A, and you click on the polls in order to vote. And then you'll see options to vote for or against the motion that's being raised. And then you can click back to the chat to continue to submit comments after that. So we're going to go through the voting of the motion now. The voting is started now. Okay. So we're going to move on now to the next motion, and the next motion is from my colleague on Dublin City Council, Nisha O'Murray, in the Dublin Bay North Constituency Executive, and there's a related motion from the Dublin Fingal Constituency Executive, and that motion is being proposed by Councillor Nisha O'Murray, and I'll ask Nisha to come in now.
Thanks, James. And greetings from a sunny Limerick, the joys of remote access for Dublin Bay North. Can you hear me?
We can hear you perfectly, Nisha.
Excellent, great. I note you had Angela Rutledge up there. Angela's a constituent of mine. She runs a great cafe. It's in her stable, Olive's Room in St. Anne's Park. So I'd encourage people to go up and sample the coffee and the food up there, and that might guarantee me a free coffee next weekend. The motion that I'm proposing today is that this Ard Fheis calls for the immediate establishment of the Commission on the Construction Industry. Anybody who has canvassed here in the last general knows that housing is the white hot topic of our time, and likely be on the agenda now, I'd say, for at least the next 10 years. We need to get to grips with affordability of housing. If younger folks in young Fine Gael and younger generations are ever going to get to own their own home. The Commission on Construction Costs has a vital role to play in that. And this commission, the government has talked about this commission, but this commission needs to be established immediately. It needs to be well resourced with strong leadership to get to the bottom of affordability issues. You know about some of those, Chair. And it needs to be given a strict timeframe to report, ideally within 9 months. Now, the commission must look at VAT on new home sales, and we have to get beyond Fine Gael's innate fiscal conservatism on something like this. The Commission needs to tackle the vested interest in construction right down to the raw material supply chains. But I think the Commission needs to be more radical again. Radical or redundant? Who was it that said that? There's a once in a generation opportunity, Chair, to change our industrial policy to try and get these international factory-based home builders into Ireland. Incentivise them in whatever way we can and whatever way is needed to set up here. These are the folks that make homes and apartments in factory settings, controlled factory settings. So you can inspect and check the quality before they leave the factory. So, you know, the likelihood of issues around mica, around issues like pyrite and that greatly reduced, not fully eliminated, but greatly reduced. A totally different approach to our traditional bricks and mortar. Then we bring them in and engage them with the LDA to build up a real serious 5-year head of steam for delivering factory-built apartments and homes across Ireland, in partnership with all the local authorities supported by Fine Gael. Now, I know, Chair, this will greatly disrupt construction in Ireland and probably upset a lot of people, a lot of vested interests. But our younger generations facing a housing crisis deserve nothing less than radical action. So that's effectively the nub of it, Cathaoirleach. I commend this motion to this Ard Fheis.
Well, if I could have a vote, but because I'm presenting it, I can't, but you have my full endorsement, Councillor O'Murray. I might go to some of the councillors on this motion. John, Councillor Clendenin, I mean, how big an issue is it in your local authority in terms of the cost of delivery of housing? It's a big issue in Dublin City Council, where there's a concern that essentially the local authority is paying above the odds for delivering public housing versus what the private sector is paying. Is it an issue that's coming up in your area?
Absolutely, James. I think it's an excellent motion, and I think there is certainly an element of regulation that's required, and a commission is certainly a way forward. But one particular aspect of housing that probably doesn't get the attention that it needs to get in recent times is actually the cost of materials, and where we see in many sectors where you see annual increases, maybe 2 or 3%. In my local builder providers, I get a call on Thursday or Friday to say that timber is going up 15% next week, and how that can be just accepted. I think it certainly needs to be addressed. And if we don't get to the nub of issues like raw materials and the cost of it, it's going to have a knock-on effect to the end product and the sale price on the market. So certainly I think this is a welcome motion and can have a very effective place in providing and the supply of housing right across the country. And as Councillor O'Murrow said, this is an issue that's not going to be solved overnight. We made a lot of progress in the last number of years with Minister O'Murphy in housing, and we're starting to see the rewards of that work now coming to fruition. But it's important that we push it on further, and I think this initiative will be very much welcome.
Thanks very much, Councillor Clendenin, and I'm going to ask for a vote now to be called on that motion. And so you can vote in the same way as I explained before. And just to give you an update, that the last motion was passed with 96% in favour, so a very positive outcome there. I'm going to move on now to the next motion, which is also from Councillor Nisha O'Murray, who's currently in Limerick but is Dublin Bay North Executive. And Nisha, I'll ask you again to introduce your motion.
I will, Cahill. Yeah, according to my colleague Jeff Johnson was originally going to propose this motion today, but he can't be here, so I will do it briefly for him, help the organiser catch up in time. And as a qualified accountant, Jeff, who engages regularly with businesses in Ireland, I know he feels very strongly about the topic. So the motion is as follows: that this Ard calls on the government to maintain the current rate of corporation tax at 12.5% due to its continuing importance for direct investment and employment nationwide. Now, defence of our corporation tax rate has long been an article of faith in policy faith in this country, and we don't believe now is the time to change it. Some of our international competitors who complain loudly about our rate actually have a much lower effective tax rate when you include the little sweetheart deals that they offer to their own state companies in their preferred sectors. The 12.5% rate is one of the key tools in our armoury for attracting foreign direct investment in what is a pretty competitive international market, and getting ever more so. So we should be looking to keep it that way. So I want to commend the motion to the Ard. Just very briefly, Chair, I know there are a lot of members tuned in here tonight. James is my colleague on the City Council. As others have said, he is standing in the by-election in Dublin Bay South. He's an excellent candidate. He's a really good candidate for that area. And I would just ask members, if they have time in the next few months, to come up and support him, because James will get over the line with your support. Thanks very much, Carla. Thanks
very much, Nisha. And Nisha cycled all the way across the Liffey to come over and campaign for me the other night. So Minister Donoghue, obviously this is a very serious issue, the changes to corporate tax that are taking place globally, and you participated in a very important meeting in your capacity as President of the Eurogroup. 12.5% has been a cornerstone of our industrial policy for the last number of years. Can we defend it?
Of course we can defend it, which is what we are doing at the moment. And I'm making the case for an agreement in relation to corporate tax which respects the ability of small and medium-sized economies to have a rate like 12.5%. So huge amount of effort going into that at the moment. The motion reflects how important it is, and we're working really hard to make that case. What I would say is the rate is a really important feature of our competitiveness as a country, but thankfully we've also many other qualities in our country, in our economy and our society that are really vital too. But it's a critical part of what we do from a tax point of view, and we're working flat out to continue to make the case for it and to defend it.
Thanks very much, Minister. And I'm going to ask for a vote on that motion now to be called. And just to give you an update that the last motion also passed with 95% in favour. So, Nisha, I hope you have the same luck with this motion. So our next motion is from Liz Bowen, a very important person to me because she's the person who recruited me to join Young Fine Gael in UCD. And I'm delighted to have her here to present her motion on behalf of the Ballantyre branch in Dublin Rathdown. We can't hear you there, Liz. Unfortunately not. Must be an issue with the sound. We can see you all right. Unfortunately, we can't hear your sound. We might come back to you, Liz. And we'll ask, which is a terrible thing to do, to ask the person who's opposing your motion to come speak before you've had the opportunity to propose it. But I'll just read your motion so that we know what the opposition is. The motion is that this Ard Fheis calls on Fine Gael in government to pursue policies to reduce the income tax burden on lower and middle income employees and retirees. And Daniel Sullivan, I'll ask you to come in, and you've 3 minutes to speak.
Okay, thank you very much, James. Can you hear me okay?
We can, yes.
Perfect. Good evening, ministers, MEPs, deputies, senators, councillors and fellow delegates. I'm opposing this motion for two reasons. The first is that it fails to give credit to the huge work that's actually been done to remove so much of the workforce from the income tax net. The second thing is that it actually binds our hands in addressing those on middle incomes who are actually moved into the higher tax bracket far too early. In a sense, it's trying to be all things to all people. It's a hugely underappreciated fact that lower paid workers in Ireland pay amongst the lowest income tax in the world. It's something the press rarely actually mention. Most income tax systems, most people will be familiar with, work as a kind of a pyramid, with those at the bottom paying what is a relatively small amount of money, but it's a significant percentage of their take-home pay. And then as you move up the ladder, people are paying progressively more and more, but it's a smaller and smaller amount of people. It's a progressive tax system and it's a good model. It means that those with the most pay the most. And I'm in agreement with that. But in Ireland, what we've done is we've progressively moved away from that by reducing the taxes on people on the lower end. And what we've really got now is effectively a spinning top model. It means that those in the middle are the ones who've had to make up the difference. So somebody on 30 grand, for example, has a tax liability that's nearly 4 times what that is of somebody on 20 grand a year, just for earning 50% more money. Somebody on 40 grand who's earning twice as much has 8 times the income tax liability. And yes, if you factor in universal social charge and PRSI payments, that will go up. But the person on 30 grand is still paying, at the end of all of that, 3 times as much as the person on 20 grand. And I believe that this precarious spinning top model is unsustainable. And this motion effectively, in the way that it's worded, seeks to reinforce that by calling out those on lower pay rather than focusing on the middle income earners that we really should have a focus on. So I think that as a party, we should have a laser focus on addressing the very low bar at which people move into the higher tax bracket. And that's why I'm opposing this motion. And I would ask for you to oppose it as well, so the party can have a more realistic and focused proposal. Thank you very much.
For giving your opposition to the motion, and we now have Liz back, I understand. And Liz, you've had to do this back to front, but you now have to propose your motion in the teeth of opposition. Oh, unfortunately, Liz, we're still having sound difficulties. Well, I'm sorry. I'm sorry about that. But I might bring sorry, hold on a second. I might bring Sinead back in. Sinead, what's your view in terms of this debate about reducing the tax burden, particularly for working parents, and you're a working parent yourself? Do you think that is the right way to go?
Yeah, I completely understand where Liz's motion is coming from, and look, as a working parent myself, I think nowadays most most households nearly have the mum and dad working, because Ireland can be an expensive place to live. So any money that can be saved or that can be put back into the home is very much appreciated. So I understand the sentiment totally behind this motion. I suppose it is important to say, I think that, Fine Gael and government has worked extremely hard to ensure fairness in the taxation system. So I think it's important really that we say that, and especially, I suppose, extended treatment benefits in relation to invalidity pensions and job seeker support for the self-employed. So I think really over the last number of years, we have gone a long way in trying to make the taxation system very fair. We've increased the minimum wage, I think, 7 times now, to 10.20 per hour. So I think we have introduced the earned income tax credit also, and then increased it to €1,650, which is the same level as PAYE. So I think really, I suppose, I do believe that Fine Gael is working really hard in relation to the tax burden. I think we have a bit to go, certainly, but I think we are making the right steps. And I think as a party, and certainly with Minister Paschal Donoghue there, I think our sentiment behind taxation has always been very fair. And I truly believe that we'll continue to do that.
I agree with you. I mean, I think, Ireland has the most progressive tax system in the OECD, and has done largely because of Fine Gael budgets and Minister Donoghue and Minister Noonan before him. And it's really important we retain that. But it's also really important that we reflect the struggles that parents have had, particularly during the pandemic. And in many cases, parents have carried a load that they never envisaged that they would carry. And it's important that we reflect that in future tax policies, particularly as we're trying to get people back to work. So I'm sorry that Liz wasn't able to speak to her motion, but I think it's a motion well made, and I'm going to call a vote on that motion now. And I can say that the last motion, I'm delighted to say that Councillor Murray's last motion passed with 90% in favour. So moving on to our final motion. This motion is proposed by Joe Lenihan of the Dublin Bay North constituency.
Thank you, Cathaoirleach. Can I just ask you to read out the motion, please?
So the motion reads that this Ardesh calls on the government to conduct a comprehensive review of the insurance industry in Ireland with the objective of ensuring that the market is economic, competitive and fair for all stakeholders.
I'll be brief because I appreciate we're running behind, but Taoiseach, Ministers, members of the parliamentary party and fellow members of the party, I will commend this motion to you because you have a situation that's developed in the last couple of years in Ireland, where the cost of insurance, particularly insurance for business, but also domestic and motor insurance, has increased very significantly. That has been accompanied by a situation where a number of large insurers, underwriters that is, have actually gone from the Irish market. And obviously, when you get suppliers withdrawing, you move towards a situation of less competition. Foreign can contribute to inflating premiums. Now, on the other side, we have to look at why insurance costs have actually gone up. And do we have issues to address around the whole area of claims, particularly the level of awards and the incidence of people making false claims, be it businesses or individuals. And we've had some progress in that area in the recent past with a revision of the levels of court-awarded compensation. One, and we need to continue progress in that direction, because it's a key element in terms of the competitiveness of Irish industry, particularly for the SME sector, where if they're asked, for example, to provide, as they often are when they go for a contract, particularly a public sector contract, have to provide employers liability, public liability, professional indemnity insurance. And professional indemnity insurance has actually rocketed in terms of its cost. So I would commend this motion. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your contribution. I think your motion is well made. Angela, I'm going to turn to you. How big an issue is it for you in the businesses that you operate?
Yes, it's huge, and I'd be very much in favour of the sentiment that Joe expresses in his motion. Like, as my understanding is that the government and Fine Gael have already, are already conducting a review of the insurance industry, and they have an action plan for insurance reform, and that as part of that, they asked the Personal Injuries Guidelines Committee to review the quantum of personal injuries damages in particular, and that those were adopted by the Judicial Council and have reduced the quantum of damages. But I think, and also the government also established an office to look at competition within the insurance industry in the Department of Finance. But notwithstanding these great developments, we do need to continue to shine a spotlight on the issue of insurance reform, because Ireland still has the highest cost of insurance and the highest quantum of damages. And small independent businesses like ours, particularly in the hospitality and leisure sector, are effectively price takers and policy takers. There is absolutely no choice, and particularly if you've had a claim in the year, it is take it or leave it. There's also no choice in the amount for which a claim is settled, or whether it is settled, or whether it proceeds to court. You can't really blame the insurance companies in that regard for wanting to settle, because of the high level of legal fees and the risk of a large award in court. In my opinion, also the new personal injuries guidelines don't go far enough in reducing the quantum of damages for minor injuries. I'm not talking about life-threatening, life-changing injuries. I'm talking about minor injuries. So, and furthermore, perhaps more importantly, I think the scope of the standard of care under the tort of negligence has been expanded consistently by the courts over the last number of decades. And so, for example, you hear stories about the likes of a woman getting a settlement claim of €50,000 for cutting her finger when she was polishing a glass, because her employer didn't teach her the right way to polish that glass, and that's just really makes you feel very vulnerable in trying to carry on the business of employing people and making a living. So another point to make is that solicitors, although they're not allowed to charge commission, they are allowed to take cases on a no full, no fee basis. So overall, in my opinion, the expansive interpretation of the standard of care required of small businesses, and then the level of awards for personal injury, have created a claims mentality and driven legal costs through the roof.
But I think the example you gave there, really has a chilling effect on businesses. And I think, you said we can't blame the insurance companies, but I think it's really important that the insurance companies do now deliver when we've made these changes in terms of the guidelines of costs. And I might just bring Sean back in there. Sean, I assume that this is an issue that very significantly affects your business as well.
Absolutely, it's a huge challenge for business, and for our experience in the hotel industry is, despite being closed for the last 15 months and very few claims being made, and the work being done on the Book of Quantum, insurance quotes that hoteliers are receiving the last couple of weeks are increasing 20%, and that just shows you the issue with the lack of competition in the market, where premiums continue to rise.
Well, listen, that's a wrap, as they say. I want to, first of all, sorry, I should put the motion to a vote before I wrap up, so that motion is now being voted on. And as that motion is being voted on, I just want to say a big thank you to all of the participants, the remote participants. First of all, it's great to see so many familiar faces, and great to see some new faces. And so just to thank Minister Damien English, to thank Councillor John Clendenin, to thank Councillor Sinead Shepherd, and to thank Sean O'Driscoll. And in studio, to thank Minister Paschal O'Donoghue, and to thank Angela for all of the contributions, which I feel has been a very lively and interesting discussion. And for everyone who didn't watch Scotland play England, we're very appreciative for joining in this evening. And we wish you all good well and good night. And if you know anyone who lives in the Dublin Bay South constituency, any friends, families, first cousins, second cousins once removed, please ask them to vote for Gagan number 1 on the 8th of July. And thanks very much.